And geekettes, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, all of my comic book friends from all across the world, welcome to another edition of Ask Chuck Dixon, where you get to ask me, Chuck Dixon, a world-renowned, world-famous, sometimes infamous, well-known, well-regarded in capitals across the globe, a comic book writer of some fame. You get to ask me questions about what I do for a living. And obviously what I do for a living is I write comic books. So let's get to our first question. Rex Moss, I complain that your Levon Cade book is not on Barnes & Noble's Nook. So I guess I will buy a paper book. Done. Bought through Barnes & Noble, as I am still annoyed with Amazon. Let me know if B&N purchases get you less than Amazon. I'll buy number 2 from Amazon if it is entertaining, or if you are politically exactly like me. No, just if it's entertaining. I asked earlier, giving you a chance to plug your Bruno bookstore, if it is yours. Is the BBS a brick and mortar store? Is it yours? Well, I apologize for Levon's Cade not being available on Nook. I don't know how large the Nook format is at this point. I assume it's got a much smaller user base than Kindle, which is where most of my sales happen. Through Kindle Direct, and but I'm pleased you bought a paper copy, quite honestly, and I'm pleased you bought it from Barnes and Noble. That's cool. Instead of going to Amazon, you were annoyed with Amazon. We were all annoyed with Amazon, but what are we going to do about it? So Amazon may turn out to be the Antichrist, except we all don't like it. If I read my Bible correctly, we're all supposed to like the Antichrist when he shows up. He's going to bamboozle all of us. I don't think Amazon's bamboozling any of us. They've just made themselves indispensable. It's a good place to be for a retailer. But anyway, thank you. As far as Bruno Bookstore goes, there is no Bruno Bookstore. I don't own a bookstore. I haven't lost my mind. And Bruno Books, it was an imprint when I first started self-publishing. There are still 2 Bruno book imprint books available on Amazon. My zombie novel Gomers and my vampire novel Blooded are still available. The digital versions of them, the Kindle versions of them, are handled by another publisher, but you can still buy the Bruno book and Shrinkage. Actually, my shoplifting crime thriller. All 3 of those books are still available through Bruno Books, through print on demand, from Amazon. I always like to see paper copies going out there. But yeah, Bruno Books does, it's not a bookstore. It's just an email address. And if you're wondering who Bruno is, he's a Tonkinese cat. He's no longer with us, passed away a few years ago. But the most macho cat I've ever met in my life, hence the name Bruno. Let's get Bruno off there. Okay, next question. Psionic Q. I plan on becoming a comic book writer artist, but right now my art skills aren't passable, so I want to focus on being a writer for now. Keep in mind, I've only written a couple of scary short stories. In my senior year of high school, I tried writing a novel, but over 200 pages later, I ended up scrapping it. Anyway, I want to know how I can get a job, any job in the comic book industry, mainstream or indie, so when I'm ready to either do my own crowdfunding comics or work at Dark Horse or Image, when my art skills hopefully improve, I'll have some experience. Yeah, I don't know how much experience you get working at a comic book company, at comic book creation. It's kind of like going to college these days to get a job. They don't teach you anything that lets you get a job. Basically, you go to college and you get the degree so that you have the credentials to get the job, and then you learn how to do the job while you're doing the job. You really don't learn anything in college. I don't know how much you would learn about the craft from the current crop of editors running the comic book companies. The other problem in that area is that most of your comic book companies are basically laying people off. In the case of DC Comics, there's nowhere to work. They don't even have offices anymore. They're all working from home, and they've had mass layoffs. I'm sure Marvel has had mass layoffs. IDW just went through another round. It's no wonder there's anybody left there. So getting a job at a comic book company, what I don't think was ever a good idea if you wanted to get into comics. And it's particularly impossible today because there's no comic book company that's hiring. I don't think the comic book companies, Marvel used to have an intern program, which I would never have recommended to anybody, but I don't believe they have even that anymore. So, I think you'd learn all the wrong things working at a comic book company. Just go independent. Just do your own thing. Just keep writing and don't stop writing and stick with it. I'm impressed that you got 200 pages into a novel and scrapped it. I mean, 200 pages, that is a novel. Couldn't you written one more chapter to wrap it all up and say, call it a day, or end it on a cliffhanger and think about book 2? That's tough. That's like leaving a child behind on an ice floe. You probably think about that novel all the time. I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing with you because I've had this experience myself. You're probably thinking about that unfinished novel every once in a while. Like, well, should I ever revisit that? But yeah, I mean, you got to strike your own path these days. And fortunately, for all the bad news out there, you can't simply go get a job at a comic book company, start getting a paycheck and learning how to do comics, since that's not possible anymore. But there's so many other possibilities with the internet, with, dare I say it, AI, to create comics on your own. And there's so many communities of creators. I mean, there's writers looking for artists. There's artists looking for writers. Just get out there, go on Discord and platforms like that and look for comic book groups and try to find some people that you can collaborate with and create some stuff and start out, do a couple of short stories, a couple of short comic book stories that you can offer digitally just to get out there. And like I always advise people trying to get into comics, trying to make a name for themselves, think of some high concept, really crazy high concept thing. The best example I've ever seen was Axeman. If you remember Axeman from the early 2000s, some guy's kid came up with this character and he just took off with it. I might even be getting the title wrong, but anyway, was it Axeman or Axe Cop? I can't remember, but it was an internet sensation for 15 minutes, and that's generally all you get these days, but enough to make a name for himself. Robert Kirkman made a name for himself with a comic called Battle Pope. It was this high concept idea of, the Pope as a martial artist. But this got him attention, because people, it's stuck out from the crowd. People were like, hey, maybe we'll hire him. That was a goofy ass comic. Maybe he's got some more in the tank. So that when you walk in the door and say, hey, I'm the creator of Captain Potato Salad, they go, oh, I remember that comic. And, they'll at least be familiar with your work. So just get something out there, create something, link up with an artist and get out there and do it. And then, see what happens. It won't be bad. If you enjoy writing, you enjoy the process, it's all going to be fun anyway. And, maybe something will come of it. I always say, just keep spinning that wheel, and you never know. You get a break, something catches on, and boom, you are a comics professional. Joshua Ignatowski, you've talked previously about the differences between the cultures of Pennsylvania and New York, specifically Philadelphia and New York City. This raises another question to take us further down the northeastern USA rabbit hole. What, in your opinion, would you say are the biggest differences between Pennsylvania culture and New Jersey culture? I think New Jersey's kind of, well, first of all, Pennsylvania, there's no Pennsylvania culture. It's often been said, and it's true, that Pennsylvania is Philadelphia on the east, Pittsburgh in the west, and Alabama in between. There is no shared, even the accents are wildly different as you move across the state. We've got the Amish. Further west, you have, Russian and Polish communities, people who, German communities, people who came over from Europe to work in the coal mines. And so you have all these different cultures. And the same is true of Jersey. South Jersey is basically an extension of Pennsylvania. I mean, there isn't a bit of difference between my Philadelphia accent that I used to have very heavily and Bruce Willis's Pennsauken, New Jersey accent. There's no difference between those accents. They're the same accent. And this is largely because, most of the people in the Philadelphia area go to South Jersey for the summer. The population quintuples along the Jersey Shore with all these people from southeastern Pennsylvania, from Philadelphia and its suburbs. And so, to the extent where, some of the best cheesesteaks you're ever going to have are at the Jersey Shore. So it's, it's really a shared culture. And then the northern part of the state, the central part of the state's a little different. The northern part of the state is largely an extension of New York City. Accents the same, attitudes the same, the rest of it. Now, central Jersey is a little different. It's mostly empty pine barrens. An incredible amount. I mean, most people don't realize this. An incredible amount of the landmass of New Jersey is wilderness. I mean, there are moose there. There are bears there. I understand they reintroduced wolves into the pine barrens. So it's kind of a different place, and it's also got its own culture. If you've ever heard John Travolta in his normal speaking voice, he's from central New Jersey, and he has something of a drawl. It's weird for a northerner to have a little bit of almost a southern drawl when he speaks, but that's central Jersey. It's also a different culture. So each state, is different, except Texas. They all seem to share the same culture, which is kind of cool. Hey, twin spin for Joshua. Okay. Joshua continues with, if I recall correctly, you said that if Dirty Harry and Harvey Bullock ever crossed paths, that would be in my pitched but failed Dirty Harry Batman crossover back in the 90s. Anyway, they'd be like brothers from another mother, which would cause them not to be able to stand each other. Would you say that this would also be the case in a scenario where Bullock would encounter Guy Gardner? Yeah, I think it'd be the same deal because Harvey and Guy Gardner and Dirty Harry are all alpha males. They've got to be the top dog. They got to be the guy in charge. So they naturally butt heads. Particularly Guy Gardner. Guy Gardner seems to rub everybody the wrong way and doesn't care. He's got so much testosterone, he never cares what anybody thinks about him. So he just says whatever's on his mind. And, Bullock is largely the same way. I mean, Bullock is, whenever I wrote Bullock, he didn't like Batman because Batman, took all the air out of the room. I mean, when Batman shows up, it's all about Batman. It's not about Harvey anymore. And I think that's what annoyed him. And also everybody's, near worship on the Gotham City Police Department of Batman, whereas Bullock, like Harry Callahan, just got all the dirty jobs. So, I don't think that, I think my theory holds that if you're too much like another person, you're not going to like them because you see what you don't like in yourself in them. And I think that would hold with Harvey and Guy Gardner should they ever meet. Or perhaps they have met. I don't know. There's an awful lot of comic books out there. It's a very long continuity. Anything could have happened. Hey, have you ever subscribed to this channel? If you haven't, please do. If you haven't, give it a thought because this helps build the channel, bring in more people, bring in more questions, and just make this more of a worthwhile endeavor for all of us. So if you want to think about subscribing, please do. If you already have, thank you so much. David asks, while I have the greatest respect for Denny O'Neil and understand he could do whatever he wanted with his own creation, the direction of Azrael after Nightfall always bugged me. Bookshelves at the time were full of action thriller novels about religious-based secret societies, their associated assassins, and exotic locales. Instead of taking advantage of this popularity and delving headfirst into the unique character of a religious assassin defender, Azrael was turned into a stock crime fighter against a rock star, no less. I'm curious as to what direction you would have taken the character post Nightfall. Also, I've always suspected that the brilliant Quesada design uniform was ditched simply to stick it to Joe for going to Marvel. Yeah, I mean, Denny was, a lapsed Catholic, like I am, and I think he just sort of, more than I did, turned his back on all of that. I didn't, I still recognize that I'm culturally a Catholic, even though I don't follow the faith anymore. I'm not an atheist or agnostic. I'm just not a Catholic anymore. Or practicing Catholic, I should say. But culturally, I still am. I mean, because the Catholic Church, they get you when you're a kid, and they that stuff's indelible. So there's many long conversations with my wife about this. She's a non-Catholic, brought up in a household that distrusts Catholics. In any case, I don't think Denny wanted to deal with any of that stuff, even though it was really, really popular with the Da Vinci Code and all that other nonsense going on at the time. But what can I say? He didn't want to deal with it, so he didn't deal with it. I think it would have been kind of interesting. One of the most interesting paperback series I ever read was The Inquisitor by Simon Quinn, pseudonym of Martin Cruz Smith. And it was about an assassin who works for the Vatican and has to pay penance. He has a license to kill, but he's got to go to confession afterwards. And I always thought that would be kind of interesting to play with, but it was Denny's creation and he didn't. The Quesada costume was abandoned largely not as a thumb in the eye to Joe, but because it was really hard to draw. It was very complex. And I remember the resentment in the room when Joe's designs for Asbats, the ultimate Azrael as Batman costume, was revealed to the artists who were going to have to draw it. There was much, grumbling and gnashing of teeth among the artists because they were like, my God, that's a complex costume. And he just did the style guide. He's never going to have to draw this in a story because he's not working here anymore. So there was a bit of resentment. It kind of reminded me of when George Perez redesigned Brainiac and all the other artists were going to have to draw this over and over again whenever Brainiac showed up. But yeah, it wasn't any kind of animosity. It was simple practicality. They simplified the costume to make it easier to draw. M. Sparks. And speaking of horsing around, Graham Nolan cameoed some professionals in Ghosts of Matacumba Key. Has he or any of your other collaborators ever done that to you, named or unnamed? And do you sneak them in occasionally? I would imagine an artist trying to sneak through unflattering cameos of editors if he were disgruntled. Like I've so often stated, I'm an invisible hand writer. I don't write forwards. I've only written one dedication. In the novels I've written. I feel that forwards, prefaces, acknowledgments, dedications, I feel that's not part of being an invisible hand writer. That you're showing, as a reader even, I felt, this is taking me out of the story. Having to acknowledge that someone wrote this. if that makes any sense at all. I just want to read the story. I don't want to know about the writer. I don't want to know about his inspirations. I don't want to know about his or her significant other or the meaningful people in their lives. I just want to read a damn story. And as a writer, that's all I want to do. I just want to bring you the story. I don't want to bring you me. I don't want to insert myself. And so I generally don't do these things. Now, Graham has fun doing it. And and it is fun. But even that, for me, reading Ghost of Matacumba Key, and he brings in people that he and I both know. Now, the vast majority of his readership, they're never even going to know. These are Easter eggs. They're never going to notice that. But I did. It took me right out of the story. Was seeing people that I know in the story. Now Graham has put me in Batman stories a couple of times. I was an Irish mobster one time, and I played myself one time in a Nightfall story where it was an after-hours poker game. Now, as far as portraying people in your comics in a negative light, yeah, I've seen a lot of that. I had an artist writer that I had a falling out with uh, include me in a panel in a comic in a very, very specific way that suggested, this is at the beginning of my professional writing career, in a very specific way to suggest that I wouldn't have a writing career very long. That was 37 years ago. And also, I mean, famously, John Byrne would include Jim Shooter-like characters in his stories, and just highly insulting to Jim Shooter. Whatever Jim Shooter did to John Byrne, it's like, Mr. Byrne, where did the bad man touch you? Whatever it was, he took it very personally, and did a lot of Shooter references, oblique and sometimes very obvious Shooter references in the stories to present Shooter as the most odious character he could, which I quite frankly find kind of childish. Um, a more subtle one was I know an artist. I won't name him because he's probably watching, and he had I don't even know what happened, but he had kind of a animosity toward Cat Ironwood, my Airboy editor at Eclipse Comics. And every story that he did for Eclipse, and maybe even after, he managed to slip a dead cat somewhere in the story, somewhere in the panels. So a cat would get run over by a car or struck by lightning, or simply a cat carcass be hanging out of a trash can in an alley. But he always slipped it in. I don't quite know why. But I have been, caricatured often. I have appeared. I really like this one panel appearance in Winterworld by Butch Geis. I thought that was kind of cool. And it goes along with my invisible hand thing. I mean, I'm not identified. It's not so obviously me that it's going to take the reader out of the story if they know what I even look like. But other people enjoy drawing me, including Flint Henry, who's done, who claims he draws the best Chuck Dixon in the comic book business. I'm not going to argue with him, but he's drawn, a bunch of drawings sometimes just for me of me. So for whatever reason, and then this caricature by Sergio Cariello that Sergio drew. I was supposed to share a table with him at a convention. I didn't arrive the first day of the convention. Sergio got tired of answering the question, where's Chuck? So he drew this picture of me and he taped it to the chair that I was supposed to sit in. And I've used this picture over and over and over again in various places. So let's move on to Gentle Savage. Mr. Dixon, who do you think the best Batgirl and Robin are? I had to contact you, Gentle Savage, to get some clarification on this. And he meant, the best characterizations of them. And of course, it's Barbara Gordon and Dick Grayson, the originals. They are the best portrayal, the classic portrayal. There's been other versions I've been involved with, obviously, in my runs on the back characters. But this is the classic stuff. This is the Batman, Robin everybody knows, and you really can't improve on them at all. Despite the fact my long association with Tim Drake, the third Robin, and of course I obviously have an affinity. A lot of affection for that character, but he's no Dick Grayson, and I never meant him to be a Dick Grayson. I always portrayed Tim Drake as not a natural, the way Dick Grayson is a natural. And of course, I wrote a lot of Dick Grayson in the issues of Nightwing that I wrote. So yeah, but I got to go with the originals. There's no improving on them. It's a Gentle Savage twin spin. Okay, let's get to it. Also, are you a fan of foreign movies? Don't get me started. When I was a kid, we were exposed to foreign films in the form of Godzilla movies and Hercules movies. And we didn't know, we knew they were foreign. We knew they came from another country, but they were dubbed. And, there was this, genre action film. So, yeah, we gobbled them up. It wasn't until like middle school that I discovered Japanese samurai movies and just fell in love. And I had to see everything made by Akira Kurosawa, and then discovered all of the other samurai directors. And this wasn't easy back in the early 70s. There was no home video. So I would, when I got older, when I got into high school, I would take the subway into Philly and go to the art houses, the repertoire film theaters down on South Street. And sometimes they would have samurai double bills and triple bills, and catch up with them. So yeah, and in general, that led me to more Japanese cinema. Right up to today, where I love the Baby Assassins movies. There's 2 Baby Assassins movies. I'm praying they make a third. These are terrific martial arts action films set in Japan, featuring 2 teenage girls who go around killing people for money. They're funny, and the fights are terrific. No effects, no wires, no nothing. It's just, one of these girls can really fight, and they're suspenseful and interesting and funny and oddly paced. Now, early on, early 70s, they brought a Belmondo movie to the United States. They dubbed it in English, and Columbia released it here, and I got to see it at my neighborhood theater. And I thought, man, this Jean-Paul Belmondo guy, this guy's like the coolest thing going, man. He's like Steve McQueen with a French accent. I got to see more Belmondo. And once again, this led me on a search for Belmondo movies, which led me once again down to South Street. And I got to see, they would run Belmondo double and triple features. That Man from Rio, Thief of Paris. I just, really dug all that stuff, which, just as the samurai movies led me to Japanese cinema, the Belmondo movies led me to French movies. And, I watched all kinds of flicks. Hey, if Isabelle Adjani ever made a bad movie, I haven't seen it. And now with, home video and all the rest of it, I'm able to basically have access to world cinema. And I'm on a mission to see every Claude Chabrol movie. He made 50 movies, comedies, parodies, action films, crime dramas, Hitchcockian and suspense films, heist stories. He made all kinds of movies, and I'm on a mission to see all of them. He made 50 movies, and I think I'm on number 26 now. I think I've seen just over half of Chabrol's output. I'm looking forward to more. But I follow a lot of other French cinema, whatever, even French pop cinema, movies like Danny Boone and guys like that, the French comedies. Now, in the mid 70s, when I worked at a TV station, they used to get Variety every week, and I, looked through it. It was meaningless to me, but once a year there was this big fat issue of Variety. I mean, this thing was like huge. It was as thick as a telephone book, and what it would commemorated was the MyFed convention, generally held in Italy. And all of the world's film producers and film distribution companies would show up at this huge show and show off their wares. And in Variety, it would be page after page after page of posters for all these foreign movies. It's the first time I saw Jackie Chan. It's the first time I saw, Italian giallo movies. And I would see these posters for all of these movies that I thought, I'll never be able to see these. They're never going to come to the United States. They're never going to be dubbed. I'm never going to see, because they're not art films. By this time, by mid 70s, it was more common to see, foreign art films show up in the United States. They weren't that hard to see, or as hard as they were before, but foreign genre films, forget about it. You wouldn't see them anywhere. And so, I would just look through, it was like looking through it was like the poorest boy in the world looking through the Sears Christmas catalog. It's like, whoa, look at this martial arts movie. Look at this South African war movie, and this Australian action flick. I'm never going to see these movies. They are never going to come here. But then, the years went by and video comes along. And I remember buying bootlegs of Hong Kong action flicks. They were the big thing, mid 80s. Everybody talking about Chow Yun-fat and John Woo and John Leung and all these other people. And so I would buy these miserable, horrible condition bootlegs, those migraine-inducing videos just to see these things. And then eventually I ended up haunting, when Laserdisc came along, haunting video stores in Chinatown in New York. I got thrown out of one because I was looking at the Laserdisc. I wanted to buy these Laserdiscs. I was watching all these movies, the girl fight movies like Iron Angels and the In the Line of Duty series. I wanted to see more of this stuff, and it was impossible to find. And I got thrown out of the store. The store owner came out. He was just enraged at this round eye looking at Laserdiscs, and he said, "You go now. These are not for you," which made me want to see them even more. And of course, Jackie Chan arrives and he becomes a big deal here, and it sort of opens the floodgates. And then more and more Hong Kong action films became available. And today it's great because they're restoring a lot of them. They're restoring movies. Inspector Wore Skirts never looked as good as it looks now on video. They do some terrific restorations. And then Bollywood movies. I like Bollywood movies. I was working on comics for an an Indian comic book publisher, and they were meant to be read in India. And so I wanted to find out, well, what do Indian audiences expect from their entertainment? Or are their stories different? How are they different? So I watched a whole bunch of Bollywood movies and really dug them, still follow them. Akshay Kumar, I'll watch every movie this guy's in. He makes action films, comedies, got terrific range. The music and the dancing in almost all of them doesn't bother me. It's kind of fun. But Bollywood movies are an investment because they're almost 3 hours long. But I find them very, very rewarding, fun, uplifting, upbeat, and just cool stuff. So that's another country whose films I follow. Russia in recent years has been making absolutely dynamite war movies. Most of them set in World War II. But recently I watched one set in current day Syria with the Russian special forces versus ISIS in Syria. They've made a number of movies about the Russians in Afghanistan, and they're always worth seeing. They put a lot of effort into them. These are big budget, well shot, beautifully acted. They're Russian, so they're obviously always very, very tragic. Russians are not known to being optimists like the Bollywood movies. But and then other films. I watched one last night about the conquest of Siberia. And it was basically Russians in the 1700s versus a Mongol horde. I mean, I eat that stuff up. That stuff's fantastic. And we don't make those kind of movies anymore. So I guess I'm a Putin stooge watching and enjoying Russian movies. And one absolutely dynamite Russian movie I saw recently it's called The Duelist. And it's this very complex revenge story about this guy who sets himself up as a duelist to basically take down all of the people who wronged him in the past, and basically manipulating them into the areas of duels. So I guess the answer is yes, I do like foreign movies. Oh, Gentle Savage, triple spin. What do you think of Hayao Miyazaki's films, if you've seen any? I think I've seen them all. I know I've seen My Neighbor Totoro enough that if I close my eyes, I could probably project the film on my eyelids. Not that that's a bad thing. My kids fell in love with that movie, as well as Nausicaa. And my wife and I watched that movie over and over and over again. We didn't really. It's one of those movies, your kids always have a movie that, oh my God, please don't ask to watch that again. But My Neighbor Totoro, it never bothered either my wife or I. We really dug it. Even if on the 28th viewing we might have fallen asleep during it. But yeah, I mean, guy's obviously a genius. He obviously, is a revolutionary force in anime, and he popularized anime for Western audiences with Kiki's Delivery Service. That's another one. I must have seen that movie 200 times. Anyway, he brought anime to a Western audience, more so than any other creator since Osamu Tezuka. And the variety of subject matter. I don't always get his movies. Spirited Away, I really don't get. Maybe it's too Japanese for me. I don't know. But Laputa or Castle in the Sky, Porco Rosso, all the rest. Yeah, I dig him. I like him a lot. I mean, who wouldn't? The guy's the guy and his studio. I mean, they're all absolute geniuses. Kane Dorr, of all your experiences and interactions with other writers, firsthand or otherwise, who are the humans who call themselves writers but can't ever really finish their book? What could be the cause of such a phenomenon? There's a lot of reasons why someone would set out to write a book and not finish it. And I've run into a lot of people, I'm working on a book. Some people just want to be thought of as working on a book. Yes, I'm writing it. So people will ask, how's your novel going? Because nobody's going to ask you how your second novel is going. Maybe that's part of it. Part of it is fear. Part of it is constantly questioning yourself, which is why I say the two most important components for a successful writer are an equal mix of ignorance and confidence. You have to believe in yourself and sort of ignore all the odds that are against you. That, well, what if my writing sucks? What if nobody likes it? What if, I spell things wrong? What if people think I'm stupid? What if this wasn't really my original idea and I'm stealing someone else's idea without realizing it? So there's a million different reasons to talk yourself out of writing. And some people do that. Some people make a career out of writing rather than have written. I forget what writer said that, that having written is a far greater pleasure than writing. Although I enjoy writing. Some writers are tortured. I'm not. I did not suffer for my art. It is not your turn. Those are the many reasons. The other reason, I think it's the largest reason, particularly if someone sets out to write a novel, is that middle passage where you want to tear your hair out, where you want to go back and rewrite everything, where you wonder why you ever started this in the first place. That middle passage where you're going from your opening, your introduction to your characters, you're setting up your scenario, setting up your plot line, putting everything into motion, and then actually it being in motion and moving toward the climax or end of your story or point of your story. It's that middle passage that's the hardest thing to write. The beginning of novels for me, novels in particular, comics aren't really even any kind of an effort for me. They're just in my DNA. But prose, I had to learn. But writing novels, the opening of the novel is always easy to me. Those first few chapters come easy. And then you write and write and write in the middle passage that you sort of slow down. I can start a novel and have a 7,000 word day. And then the following week, 2,000 word week, if I'm lucky. So you just sort of chop away, slog away, build it. And then you reach this point where I call it the downslope. You reach this point where you realize I'm almost at the end here. Everything that I've, in this, I'm not saying this pertains to writing the great American novel or any pretense of literature. I write action stuff. And it's going to reach a climax. It's going to reach a breaking point. It's going to reach a collision course of characters and events that come to some sort of eruption before the novel ends. And when I get to that point, the writing speeds up again because now I know right where I'm going. Everything I've constructed to reach this point, Frodo and Gollum, wrestling at the edge of the volcano. I'm there now. Okay, so everything now is it's pie. So I'm back to 4,000 or 5,000 word a day writing until the damn thing's done, and then it's done, and then you go back and you rewrite. And the greatest pleasure, and I like to tell this to anybody who's halfway through a novel or has been sitting on a novel or who has been in the process for many years and never completed work. I got to tell you, the greatest pleasure I've had in writing prose is rewriting. Comic book rewriting is a pain in the butt because you got to go back and reformat. But rewriting prose, it's the most enjoyable part of the process for me because you're back, you're polishing, you're seeing things in the work you didn't see before, you're getting to fix things, you're getting to ask yourself that question every writer should ask themselves a million times a day while they're working. Is there a better way to say this? You get to fix all the things you're unhappy with, and it's all done. It's already done. The structure's there. The house is built. Now you're just painting it, or more specifically, you're hanging the pictures in it. You're doing all the little finish work, the little fiddly stuff at the end. And that's fun. And that's fun. That goes fast. That goes actually faster than I want. I often set aside a couple of weeks to rewrite a novel, and I'm generally done in a few days. Again, I write genre stuff. No pretenses to literature here. So this doesn't apply to everybody, but if you're writing genre, action, science fiction, westerns, detective stories, I hesitate to say formula. I hesitate to say format. I prefer template. There's a template for those stories. They have to come to a satisfying conclusion. They can't, unless you have pretenses to art, end ambiguously. So, there you have it. If you're writing something and you've been writing it for 5 years and you're in that middle passage, just keep chopping your way to the end. Get to that end, have that fun feeling of being on the downslope, and then the even more fun feeling of going back and doing the rewriting. Now it's done. You finished it. So I encourage you, if you are writing anything, complete it. Complete it. You'll find out if you can do it. Set that challenge. Can you run that marathon? And there you have it. Those are my words of advice, my words of wisdom. Take them or leave them. And I'll see you all down the road.